Hello and welcome once again. This is Jennifer McGuire and I hope you're having a great day. So today I am sharing with you a pop-up panel card design. This is a great technique because you can do this in many ways and with many different products. And I'll show you lots of examples today. Also, there are no special dies needed to do this technique. The fun thing about this is from the outside it looks like a normal card, but when you open up the card, there's a pop-up feature that gives a fun surprise. I'm also very excited today because I'm using an extra special stamp set that was created as a collaboration and something that I've always dreamed about seeing happen, and I'm excited it finally is. So let's get started. Again, I have lots of different examples for you. We're going to start with this one that you see here. Now this one does feature that special stamp set. This is the Concord and Ninth Hero Arts Props Turnabout Stamp Set. Concord and Ninth designed this special stamp set in honor of Hero Arts' 45th anniversary. So Hero Arts has been around for 45 years. Concord and Ninth has been around for about 5 years. These two companies have become good friends, and so Concord and Ninth did this stamp set in honor of Hero Arts, which I just think is the coolest thing ever. I'm good friends with both of these companies, so it really makes me happy to see this come to life, this idea of honoring Hero Arts. So this is a special turnabout stamp, which I've done many videos on turnabout stamps in the past. I'm going to show you how to use this particular one, and if you've used turnabouts before, it's the same thing, but this one's really extra special because it's in the celebration of the 45 years of Hero Arts. Also, that rectangle shape at the top, that is designed to coordinate with the Hero Arts rounded rectangle die set, which I use quite often. I love that they made it fit one of the Hero Arts current products. So if you want to cut that out perfectly, you can use these dies. Okay, let's use that turnabout stamp, which is the big image that you see there on the bottom. To do this, you need the guide that comes with the turnabout stamp set. So that's the guide that you see here. It's clear. Make sure it says this side up, which is at the top of that clear guide. And you're going to take your stamp and you're going to line it up with the guide. So this is stamped side down, so the back of the stamp is facing up towards the camera. And see how I'm lining up the images on the stamp with the images on the guide. Once I have that lined up, we're going to take the Concord and Ninth jig. This is an inexpensive product that is helpful when using turnabout stamps, but I'll link to an older video I've done without the jig, how you can create your own. You can check that out at the top, or you can check it out in the description below. This is the jig here, and if you look, there is an X down the center. You're going to line up that X with that black X on the guide. So I got the two X's lined up. It's hard to see on the video, but they're lined up perfectly. I'm putting this in the corner of my MISTI stamping tool. Any stamp positioner would work. I close the door on my MISTI, and that transfers the stamp onto the door. And now I know it's perfectly positioned to do my turnabout stamping. Now onto that jig, I'm putting some adhesive with a piece of cardstock that is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I'm gluing that right onto my jig just temporarily at the center, and there are actually little marks on the jig so you can make sure your paper is centered. Now I'm going to stamp this once, and I'm just using a variety of different inks. This one is Simon Says Stamp Fog, and I'll stamp that onto my cardstock, and I have my first image. I wanted it to be a little bit darker, so I'm going to just double stamp it. That's another great thing about a stamping tool such as this MISTI. Okay, so now that I have my first image done, you see that 1 in the top corner of my jig on the top right corner? Now I'm going to turn it so that the 2 is in the top right corner. So I'm going to turn it 1 turn, and we're going to stamp again. So this time I'm going to stamp with a different color of ink. I started out with a different yellow ink, but I felt like it was too soft. So I decided to come in with the Gina K Sweet Corn ink, which is a nice yellow that's not too bright, and I ended up going with that color. Now I'm going to rotate it so that the 3 is in the top right, so I just did 1 more turn. I've cleaned my stamp between each color switch. This time I'm using Gina K Ocean Mist, and I'll stamp that. And again, I want it to be a little bit darker, so I'll double stamp it, but you don't have to double stamp if you don't want to. Now I'm going to clean my stamp, turn my jig 1 more time, And then I'll stamp with my final color, which is Hero Art's Fresh Peach ink. So if you'll notice, my pattern has built by doing this turnabout technique. Concord & Ninth has many turnabout stamp sets. I will link to a bunch of videos here at the top right and down below if you want to see some other options that they have. But I like that this is a great way to create your own background, and you can use any colors you want. I wanted to show you another thing that you can do with your turnabout stamp. After you have it set up like I just showed you, you could, instead of using the jig with a smaller piece of paper attached to it, you could use a 6-inch by 6-inch piece of cardstock, as I'm doing here. And you do the same thing. You just rotate the paper each time, ink up with a different color, and stamp. This way we end up with a bigger piece of stamped cardstock that we can trim down and use however we want. So there are many different ways to use your turnabout stamp, and I wanted to show you a couple here today. I really like the encouragement theme of this turnabout, so I decided to do a couple more examples. This one I did some tone-on-tone on colored paper. I have the first two I did, and then that one there on the right I did with some peaches and orange color inks. Okay, so let's create some pop-up panel features with these backgrounds. And the backgrounds are used on the front of the card, so now we're switching to the inside. Now for the inside of my card, I am using that outline image that's in the same Props Turnabout stamp set. And I'm stamping it with black ink. This is Altenew Obsidian black ink, which stamps solid black, super dark black. I mean, it stamps beautifully. So I'm going to stamp it a few times since I have a few cards to do. That Props Turnabout stamp set also includes these little images that you can fill in. So we've got the star and we've got the hearts that you can fill into those open areas. And then also the You Amaze Me image that fits perfectly at the center. I just think that looks so nice and finished. We need to do a little more stamping for the front of our card. We need our sentiment there in the center. For this, I use the Concord & Ninth Filled In Florals stamp set. I thought that Hello Darling Friend image that's at the top right would fit perfectly with the design of this card. So I went ahead and white heat embossed that onto some dark pool cardstock. But I decided I wanted to double my heat embossing just to make the embossing smoother and a little more dimensional. So I white heat embossed it once, and now right on top of that white heat embossing, I'm stamping it again with Versamark ink and adding another layer of white embossing powder. You can do this 2 or 3 times to give a smoother look to your embossing and more dimension. I just went with 2 this time. So each time you want to make sure your powder is cool completely before you add another layer of Versamark and the embossing powder. And here's a close look at the smooth looks that you get by doubling your embossing. Okay, so now that we have our stamp pieces done here, I just have the dies to cut them out. This is the Hero Arts rounded rectangle die that I showed you earlier, the set earlier. And then I also have the die that cuts out the Hello Darling Friend. And I like how they keep those letters open so you can easily line it up. I ran that through my die cut machine, and now I have my die cut pieces ready to go on our card. I wanted my Hello Darling Friend image to have some dimension to it so it would stand out more against that busy stamped background. So I die cut 3 more Hello Darling Friends. I didn't bother stamping on these since they'll be hidden, and I'm just going to glue them together with liquid adhesive so that we have 4 stacked together and the top one is white heat embossed. This will give it some great dimension when we add it to our card. So here I'm going to do a comparison. I have a Hello Darling Friend that isn't layered. The one in my right hand isn't layered. And you can see how it kind of gets lost in the background. By adding those extra layers behind it, it makes it stand out more. So here's a comparison. The one on the left is just 1 layer. The one on the right has many layers, and you can see how it stands out much more. Okay, now it's time to create the pop-up feature in the inside, and this is really easy to do. For this, you need 2 pieces of white cardstock that are 1 inch by 5 inch. I'll show you some other size options later in this video. I'm actually going to use my scoreboard and my bone folder and do both pieces at once, score both at once. And I'm going to do at every inch mark. So I did at 1 inch mark, 2 inch mark, 3 inch mark, and 4 inch mark. And again, I'm just scoring both of the pieces at once just to save some time. Once I have these scored, I'm going to fold along each of those score lines on both of the pieces. I end up with these goofy looking shapes that you see here. But on one of the square flaps, I'm going to put some strong adhesive. You can use double-sided tape or strong liquid adhesive. Whatever you use, just make sure it's strong. I'm using Gina K Connect, and I'm putting adhesive on one of the square flaps. Then I'll take the other end square flap and line it up with it and hold it there to make sure it dries completely. And I'm going to do that to both pieces. So we end up basically with two open cubes. It really is up to you what size cubes you make. You can actually make them bigger, make the score lines farther apart, and it'll pop up more. It really just depends on the card you're making. And I'll show you other options in this video. Next, we're going to glue these two cubes together. So on any of the sides of one cube, I'm putting some strong adhesive and gluing the other to it. So we just have these two cubes stuck together. If you look at it from the open end, it looks like an 8. Now I'm going to give this a few minutes to dry. I think it's best that it's completely dry before moving on. While it's drying, I'm just doing a bit of random stamping on the inside of my card that will show up when you open it up, and the panels will pop up in the center. Okay, now that that's dry, I'm putting some strong adhesive on one side of our double cube. Once I have it on there, I'm going to line up the center of where the cubes meet with the crease in my card. You want to make sure that lines up. The center where the cubes meet lines up with the crease in the card, and you want to press that down there and again give it a few minutes to dry. If you're using double-sided tape, you don't need to wait for it to dry. However, once you stick it down, it really needs to stay where you put it. With liquid adhesive, you have a little wiggle room. Okay, after that is dry, I'm going to glue my two panels on top of those little cubes we created. So I'm putting liquid adhesive on the top of this left cube, and then on the right cube too. On the left, I'm going to add that You Amaze Me die cut, and on the right, I'm going to add my sentiment die cut. I use the rounded rectangle for that too. Ignore the sentiment I wrote on there. I put the wrong sentiment with the wrong card, so I end up switching that out to a different sentiment. Okay, so you can see here, when it closes, it doesn't have that much dimension, actually. You'll be able to fit in an envelope just fine, but it does pop up and give you dimension when you open it. So I glued my stacked die cut in the front of my card, and then I also added a few little gemstones from this Pink Fresh jewel box. Really like this box because a lot of colors are included, so I can quickly grab it and find whatever I need for my card. All right, here's a look at the completed card. On the outside, we have that fun background with the stacked die cut in the center. And then when you open it up, you have that crazy surprise of the pop-up panel feature. So you can really glue anything onto those cubes that we created that pop up. But in this case, I did two die cut panels. I like that the handwritten message on the inside also pops up because I think that's a really important part of the card too. By the way, that playful sentiment that I have stamped on my envelope is from the Hero Arts Stamp Just For You stamp set. I've used this many times in videos, and I'll be using it on my envelopes today and on a card that I show you later in this video. Okay, let's do another pop-up version using this Props Turnabout stamp set. This time it's a top folding card and the panel pops up itself, leaving room for a personal message below it. The two cubes that I'm creating this time are a little bit smaller. Each piece is 3/4 inches by 3 3/4 inches. This time I'm scoring at every 3/4 of an inch. You could do what I did in my last example if you wanted to, where it was a little bit of an easier measurement. Doesn't matter. I just wanted to show you another option. Sometimes you need to create smaller cubes in order for it to hide behind your die cut. So once again, I'm going to fold these up, add some adhesive to one of the flaps, and then fold them into the cube. And I'll have two of these, and then I will glue one of the sides together to create that 8 shape. Once I have that, I can put adhesive along the back side of it, and then I will glue this into my top folding note card. so that where the two cubes meet at that center point lines up with the crease of my card. Give that a little bit of time to dry. And I have another one of these stamped panels from the Props Turnabout stamp set. I die cut it, and now I'm scoring it right in half so that I can fold this perfectly in half. This way, when you open the card, it pops up. It becomes unfolded. I'll glue this on the top of our pop-up feature, making sure the score line at the center of our stamped panel lines up with where those two cubes meet. So you want all your crease lines to meet up. So let's take a look at the completed card. The front is very similar to the last example we did. I just changed the colors up a bit. All of these cards, by the way, are 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. So when you open this one up, you have a smaller pop-up feature. That panel pops up, and there's plenty of room underneath it to write a personal message. You could do some stamping on the inside, but I decided to leave this one simple. Okay, so now that we have done a panel pop-up, a simple one with a top folding card, let's do one with the side folding card. Again, I'm using all of the same products. On this one, I'm going with even a smaller amount of pop-up, so I'm making smaller cubes. In this case, they are 1/2 inch by 2.5 inches, so I have two pieces here, and I'm scoring them at every 1/2 inch. So this will pop up a little bit less. Really doesn't matter how big you make these, whatever you want. You just want to make sure that your die cut will be big enough to cover them. Once again, I'm just folding them, gluing the two flaps together. Then I will glue the sides of both of the cubes together. And then I will glue that along the crease of our card. While I give that a little time to dry, I will take another stamped and die cut panel piece, and this time I'm going to score down the center vertically and fold that in half. So it really doesn't matter what your die cut shape is, you just want to fold it right down the center. And then, of course, we glue this on the top of our pop-up feature, making sure the crease in that panel lines up with the centers of where the cubes meet. Okay, so here's a final look at that card. This has that tone-on-tone pool-colored background, again with the stacked die cut in the center. And when you open it up, there's some stamping and also that pop-up panel feature. This one pops up less than the others, just depends on what look you're going for. But there's plenty of room to write a personal sentiment over there to the right. I did have one more background that I created, but I decided to make one without a pop-up feature. I just used the same stamp set. All of this is done with that Props Turnabout stamp set. And it's actually a pretty quick card to come together thanks to this well-designed stamp set. So I just wanted to show you it works great for non-pop-up cards too. Okay, let's change gears and go for a completely different look. In this case, when you open up this card, you have two butterflies that pop up. You could do this with hearts or flowers or whatever die cut shapes you have. This features the Concord & Ninth Butterfly Love Turnabout stamp set. So there are lots of images on here, including a turnabout stamp. So that big centerpiece is a turnabout. And then there are coordinating dies available. So I'm going to quickly go through this turnabout just like we did earlier, but I'll do it super fast. I line my stamp image up with the guide. Then I line up the X on the guide with the X on my jig. Put it in the corner of my MISTI stamping tool. Close the door on it, and now we're ready to stamp. I put some adhesive on the back of a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch piece of white cardstock and glued that to my jig, and we can start our stamping. I again did 4 colors of ink. This time I stamped Simon Says Stamp Fog ink several times to make it a little bit darker. That's a great way to get more out of your ink colors. I turned it one turn and then stamped with Gina K Sweet Corn ink. Turned it another turn. This time I'm using W+9 Piggy Bank ink. This is a beautiful light corally pink color. And I stamped that a few times to make it a bit darker. Rotated it again and then did that Hero Arts Fresh Peach ink, which is one of my all-time favorite colors. So there we have a beautiful background created with a different turnabout stamp set from Concord & Ninth. So I cut this at an angle to glue on the front of a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch side folding note card. I also stamped a butterfly from that same stamp set, and I stamped Life is Beautiful. And then I also have a silver metallic cardstock strip and a thin yellow cardstock strip. And I'm going to assemble all of these pieces on the front of my card. I like to keep the outside of my card simple if the inside has a lot going on. I don't know why. I feel like I don't want to take away from what's going on the inside, so I keep that outside simple. Now this large butterfly I stamped with the Hero Arts Fresh Peach ink, and I added the little body and antenna die cut from silver cardstock. And then I have my little sentiment strip to glue on top. Okay, now for that sentiment and for the butterflies I'm about to stamp, I used the Concord & Ninth Beautiful Butterfly stamp set. This works nicely with that butterfly turnabout set I just showed you. So my sentiment, Life is Beautiful and So Are You, I split it. So Life is Beautiful is on the front of the card and So Are You will be on the inside of the card. So I'm stamping a few of those random butterflies in the inside of my card. And then I have two more of the larger die cut butterflies that I'll have pop up using our pop-up feature on the inside too. Now for this pop-up feature, I needed my little cubes that will pop up to be tiny. So I made strips that are 1/4 inch by 2.5 inches, and you need 4 of them for this particular die cut. And I'm going to score at every 1/2 inch. You could score these one at a time. I just like to save time by doing them all at once. I'll fold these up and then glue the little ends together so we end up with 4 cubes that are all very narrow, but they'll pop up nicely with these die cuts. I again will glue 2 together to create that 8 shape, and I'll have 2 of those, so I have 2 8-looking pieces. Okay, now it's time to add these inside of our card. So I'm putting adhesive along the back and lining up with the crease in our note card, which is hard to see in this video since it's white. So I'm going to glue down the butterfly that will pop up on the right first. So I'm adhering it right onto that right cube, making sure that the edge of my die cut on the left lines up with where the cubes meet, that center line. Then I'll put the other set of cubes into the card, lining up with the crease of the card. And now I'm just going to reline that up so the edge of my die cut, the left edge, lines up with the crease of the card. Now we'll do the same on the other side with my other die cut. So you'll see why I had to do 2 pop-up features to make this butterfly stand up, and I made the pop-up feature smaller so it's hidden behind the die cut wings. So you can take any die cut and make it pop up. I do recommend something that's a little bit bigger in a simple shape like a butterfly, heart, square, circle, rectangle, and you can turn it into a fun pop-up feature. I added my little sentiment on the pop-up feature, and I have plenty of room for a handwritten message below. Okay, my next example is actually a very simple design, but this time when you open up the card, there's a double pop-up feature. I've done a card kind of like this in a past video, but I thought it'd be fun to revisit. On this card, I used the Hero Arts Heart Confetti die, which I use on the front of my card, and then also the Hero Arts Infinity Heart die set. I'm a big fan of their infinity sets because they have lots of the same shape dies but different sizes. They're a great investment and a great price point. Now for this, I need 4 cubes once again because we're doing a double pop-up feature. This time I'm doing the same dimensions that I used earlier. These are 1/2 inch by 2.5 inches, and I'm scoring each at 1/2 inch marks along the way. Now I've found it too hard to score all 4 at once, so I'm doing 2 at a time. I'll again glue these together so I have 2 pairs, and that will help me to create this double pop-up feature. So I created 2 hearts, one that's smaller than the other, and I'm scoring them both down the center to fold them in half. I've white heat embossed the sentiment on here from that Hero Arts Just For You stamp set that I showed you earlier that I've been using on my envelopes. So I've scored both of my hearts down the center. Now I'm gluing my pair of cubes onto my card, lining up with the crease on the card. Once that's dry, I'm going to take my bigger heart and line up the crease once again. I like to do half of it, let that dry, put adhesive on the other half, and fold it down. That way I can be sure that my crease stays lined up. That's very important. Now on top of this, I'm going to put my other pop-up feature, let that dry, making sure that my creases line up, and then add the smaller heart on top of that. So when you open up this card, 2 hearts pop up, so it really gives you a ton of dimension. So I'm going to skip showing how I created the front of the card because I really just glued things together. I have that heart die cut background that's white on a white note card. I have a heart with a white heat embossed sentiment from that Hero Arts Just For You stamp set, and also an envelope from the same set. And when you open it up, you have that double heart feature that pops up. So you could do this with any basic large shape die cut. You could do circles, hearts, stars, squares, rectangles, whatever you want. Okay, so I have one more example that I wanted to share with you because this uses a particular die set that I think is really cool and I thought you might like to see. So when you open up this card, there's this great pop-up butterfly feature, and it pops up at an angle, which I think is super cool. This uses some products from Concord and Ninth. On the front of the card, I'm using Concord and Ninth Simple Serif dies and stamps. You can use these either together or separately. The size is awesome. They're about 1 inch tall, and they really work well together or separately, which really gives you more bang for your buck. So on the left here, I have a white side folding note card that I've stamped with the Concord and Ninth Herringbone stamp set and Simon Says Stamp Fog ink. Onto it, I'm gluing the stacked letters that spell Hello, My Kind Friend. So I die cut 3 of each letter from white cardstock and glued them together for that stacked dimension. On top of those letters, I glued a colored letter die cut that I've white heat embossed the stamped letter on. So it took some time to do this, but I'll be honest with you, I think it's definitely worth it in the end to get that dimension and all that color and the white heat embossed letter at the center. So I'm just gluing all of these letters down, and I also have some butterflies that you can see there to the right that I stamped in a light pink ink, and I'll glue to the background to fill in some of the open spaces. On the inside of the card, I'm using the Concord and Ninth Beautiful Butterfly Pop-Up Die Set. This is a die set meant for a pop-up feature, and it does it at an angle, which I think is cool. I assembled a simple butterfly, but this piece here is the key piece for this feature. It die cuts and scores the pieces, so I'm just folding along the score lines. Then there are these 2 cuts, or these 2 slits, that you hook together. You hook the 2 slits together, and it creates this funny looking piece here. It looks kind of like a fish from the side. This is going to be that angled pop-up feature that's perfect for this butterfly, but you can use it with other shapes too. Now on the back of that pop-up feature, so it would be kind of like the head of the fish, you're going to put strong adhesive. This time I used double-sided tape, but I could definitely use liquid adhesive if I wanted. Now inside of the tail of this little die cut feature, I'm putting some double-sided tape also. And then I'll remove the release paper from that. So I have it on kind of both sides of this. Okay, so now we're going to glue this into the crease of our card, lining up the fold line on our pop-up feature with the score line of our card, or the crease of our card. And we'll press that down so you can see the tail of the fish is sticking out. Now onto that, we're going to take our butterfly. We're going to fold him in half. It does have a score included with the die cut. And we're going to add that onto that pop-up feature. And you want to line up again the crease of the butterfly with the crease on our pop-up feature. You want to press that all together nicely to make sure it's secure. So here's the completed card. I glued everything on the front. And then when you open it, this butterfly pops up at an angle, and it is super cool. So you could use the pop-up feature I showed you earlier, but that just pops up flat. This one pops up at an angle, and it just works really well. So you could use this with other dies also. Okay, there you have it, a bunch of different examples on creating a fun pop-up feature inside of your cards. I linked to all of the supplies that I use down below in my YouTube description, and I also have much more information on my blog, which you can find by clicking on the top right here. In the middle are a couple other related videos. I appreciate you stopping by and spending this long amount of time with me. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon.